It's hard to believe that a catastrophe of this scale really happened, but how much of HBO's dramatization is grounded in fact?
There has been a nuclear accident in the Soviet Union, and the Soviets have admitted that it happened. The Soviet version is this.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 things Chernobyl got factually right and wrong.
There has been an accident at the Chernobyl atomic power station.
For this list, we're sifting fiction from fact in HBO's miniseries Chernobyl. In case you're not up to date, a spoiler alert is now in effect. Number 10. The Pripyat evacuation was delayed. True.
Did you lower the control rods or not? Take him to the infirmary.
For creator Craig Mazin, the most shocking part of the Chernobyl disaster wasn't the explosion itself, but how the citizens of neighboring city Pripyat were kept in the dark.
What's fascinating to me is not that Chernobyl exploded, it's how close people were and how unaware they were, and how that night just unfolds in a way that I had no idea it unfolded and would have never predicted.
As depicted in Chernobyl's first episode, those in charge grossly underestimated the danger.
Well, that's not great, but it's not horrifying.
The public wasn't alerted, as it was felt that the situation could be resolved quietly, with no dire consequences. It isn't until the end of episode 2 that news of the incident spread, prompting a quote-unquote short-term evacuation at Pripyat on April 27, 1986. By this point, though, nearly 36 hours had passed and the damage was done. Therein lies the true tragedy that this miniseries hauntingly captures. Number 9. The key players had mostly British accents. False.
Comrade Legasov, all victories inevitably come at a cost.
The Chernobyl nuclear power plant and Pripyat are in northern Ukraine, but the characters of Chernobyl speak in English in the actors' own native accents. Craig Mazin made this creative decision early on in production, worrying that fake accents would start to sound comedic over time, like the Rocky and Bullwinkle show antagonists Boris and Natasha.
All I hear is a man I don't know, engaging in conjecture, in direct contradiction to what has been reported by party officials.
I apologize.
The showrunners experimented with the idea of having the actors try out Eastern European accents, but it turned the characters into caricatures. So, instead, the Soviet Union is suddenly populated with English speakers who have British, Swedish, and Irish accents.
I'm not good at this, Boris. The lying.
Mazin did choose against casting American actors, however, as he felt that would be too distracting. Number 8. Lyudmila Ignatenko story. True and false. Firefighter Vasily Ignatenko and his wife Lyudmila are two of the most tragic figures in the series. Although some details are tweaked, much of their story is all too true.
I'm here to see my husband, Vasily Ignatenko. He's a firefighter from Chernobyl. I have permission.
Chernobyl? I'm sorry, no visitors.
In the show, Lyudmila pays off a hospital employee to see her dying husband, and lies about being pregnant. That part really happened, but in real life, she also had to lie to the head radiologist about whether or not she already had children. Unlike in the show, the hospital staff strictly enforced the no-touching rule. Regardless, Mazin doesn't shy away from the fact that Lyudmila ultimately lost her husband and baby.
The love story that we're telling between Lyudmila and her husband, I think, only makes sense in the context of what is happening to him in front of her eyes.
Right, which is absolutely horrifying.
Number 7. 3 volunteers went into Chernobyl's basement. True.
We need to find 3 plant workers who know the facility well enough to enter the basement here, find their way through all these ductways, get to the sluice gate valve here, and give us the access we need to pump out the tanks.
The ending of episode 2 is like something out of a horror movie, as Alexei Onanenko, Valery Bespalov, and Boris Baranov venture into Chernobyl's basement to drain water. This was done to prevent lava-like corium seeping into the water and causing a steam explosion that could have devastated much of Europe. It's difficult to say if Mikhail Gorbachev ordered the mission, and their big volunteering scene is largely romanticized. But Onanenko, Bespalov, and Baranov really did volunteer, knowing that the mission could be fatal. Fortunately, they survived. Baranov didn't die until 2005, while Onanenko and Bespalov are still living. Number 6. Miners were brought in to dig underneath. True.
I need all 100 men to gather their equipment and get on the trucks. To where? That's classified.
Although Chernobyl's basement was drained, it was still feared that the lava-like corium would burn through the concrete pad and contaminate the groundwater. To prevent this from happening, nearly 400 miners from nearby areas were enlisted to dig a tunnel underneath the pad to put in a heat exchanger. The miniseries depicted most of the miners stripping down to their birthday suits due to the heat. While accounts differ, a few indicate that some miners really did get completely naked. It's been reported that 1 out of every 4 miners at the site died from cancer or radiation poisoning brought on by Chernobyl.
For what purpose?
What do you mean, for what purpose?
The real tragedy is that the corium never melted through the concrete pad, meaning the miners never had to dig.
So all of that effort and ultimately
was unnecessary
because it never melted down to the concrete pad.
Because it never melted through the concrete pad, so it never got to the groundwater.
Number 5, that helicopter crash. False.
No. They're too close.
In the episode Please Remain Calm, the Soviets try to tame the raging fire by dropping sand and boron from helicopters, which is true. Against Legasov's instructions, one of the helicopters flies directly over the core. Emerging from the cloud of smoke, the helicopter almost immediately crashes. Although there was a helicopter crash at Chernobyl, this didn't happen until October 1986, almost 6 months after the explosion first took place. This crash reportedly occurred when the aircraft's rotors hit a crane cable, resulting in the deaths of the pilot and 3 additional souls. Even if the crash didn't play out like the miniseries depicted it, several pilots did lose their lives due to radiation exposure. Number 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. True. The tragic irony of the Chernobyl disaster is that it happened in the midst of a safety test at Reactor 4. Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov really did ignore objections from plant workers Akimov and Toptunov.
The control system tank, hydrogen. You and Toptunov, you morons, blew the tank.
At 1:23 a.m. and 40 seconds, Akimov tried to perform an emergency shutdown, but the control rod seized.
Call the fire brigade.
The first episode of this miniseries is entitled 1:23:45, deriving its name from the infamous timestamp of the subsequent explosion. Even though time was of the essence, the fire alarm wouldn't be activated until 1:26 a.m. and 3 seconds, which goes to show just how poorly the situation was handled. Number 3, Brukhanov and Fomin mishandled the disaster. True.
I'm going to the administration building now to call Brukhanov and Fomin. They're going to want a full report.
While countless mistakes were made throughout the Chernobyl disaster, the miniseries singles out plant manager Viktor Brukhanov and chief engineer Nikolai Fomin as 2 of the most reckless individuals responsible for the chaos. As seen in the first episode, this pair not only refused to accept that the core had exploded, but Fomin ordered Deputy Chief Operational Engineer Anatoly A. Sitnikov to check on the reactor. Sitnikov was exposed to a fatal amount of radiation as a result, but Brukhanov and Fomin continued to deny anything was wrong. The 2 were eventually arrested and found guilty for violating safety regulations that amounted to the disaster, receiving 10-year sentences each, along with Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov. Number 2, Ulana Khomyuk. False.
Ulana Khomyuk of the Belarusian Institute for Nuclear Energy.
What a pleasure. Let me introduce
I'm here about Chernobyl.
Numerous scientists were brought in to deal with the fallout of the Chernobyl disaster. So many, in fact, that a 5-episode miniseries couldn't cover them all. For the sake of storytelling, a composite character was created named Ulana Khomyuk, played by Emily Watson. Discussing her role in The Scotsman, Watson stated, quote, "She's not a real person, but represents the many scientists who worked fearlessly and put themselves in a lot of danger to help solve the situation." Brilliant and brave, Khomyuk does justice to the scientists who risked their lives. One aspect that is entirely fabricated, though, is the idea that a lone whistleblower uncovered the accident's cause. On the contrary, it was no secret among the investigating scientists that the RBMK reactor had problems.
In 1975, at an RBMK reactor at Leningrad, a fuel channel ruptured. The operators pressed AZ5, but instead of the power going down immediately, for a brief moment, it went up.
How is that possible?
Not quite at the end yet. Almost there, though. Just be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Alright, back to business. Number 1, Valery Legasov's suicide. True. The miniseries doesn't get every detail about protagonist Valery Legasov down to a T. For example, Legasov is portrayed as a reactor expert, when in reality his specialty was radiochemistry. Nevertheless, one notable fact that Chernobyl got right was that Legasov committed suicide by hanging himself close to the 2-year anniversary of the reactor explosion. Granted, it's impossible to say if Legasov's suicide lined up with the exact minute the disaster took place, which the miniseries poetically suggests. Yet the way Legasov died is chillingly spot on. And Legasov really did record a series of tapes exposing new facts about the disaster, giving the world a better understanding of how it spiraled out of control.
To them, a just world is a sane world. There was nothing sane about Chernobyl. What happened there, what happened after, even the good we did. All of it. All of it. Madness.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojo. And be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.